CB1 and welcome. This is Deanna from the Director of Planning at CB1. And first up is we're going to hear from the Hudson River Park Trust. Noreen Doyle has very kindly, who's the Executive Vice President of the Trust, has very kindly offered to come and speak to us on resiliency measures over there on the west side in the park. You know, it's a tough question. We've spent a lot of time and energy looking at the east side of Lower Manhattan, but very, very little time and discussion on the west side. Also, we've heard from the Battery Park City Authority, a little from the Battery, very little. Certainly hear from folks on the east side coastal resiliency plan, but nothing on the west side. So we're hopeful just to learn from Noreen a little bit about what the Trust is looking to do in the future in terms of dovetailing at all with city, state, federal agencies, and what the Trust themselves are able to do, looking at, you know, rising degrees and water. So without further ado, we welcome you. Thanks very much for coming.
I'm going to introduce my colleague, Rashi Puri, also of the Trust.
Thank you.
Do you suggest here?
Oh, sure.
So that people can see us?
That's a good idea.
Good? I'll just stand. I mean,
Is this a visual presentation?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. So, all right. Well, wherever you're comfortable.
So, just for context, so my name is Noreen Doyle from the Hudson River Park Trust. Many of you, but maybe not all of you, may know Hudson River Park. We are the city-state project that goes from the northern edge of Battery Park City, just a bit north of Chambers Street, all the way up to 59th Street. So it's a 4-mile area. It's basically all of the piers except for the passenger ship terminal and one privately owned pier in that whole area. So it's about, I think, 36 piers in different states, ranging from the Intrepid to Chelsea Piers to lots of, hopefully you've gotten to enjoy beautiful public open space. The Hudson River Park Trust is officially a New York State public benefit corporation, so we have a mix of city and state board members, and we're a mix of city and state land, so we are a mix of city and state everything. We had to get federal permits in order to build in the Hudson River. We had state permits. There's all kinds of regulatory issues on the federal, state, and city levels. And so we're frankly always talking with the federal, state, and city levels of government about pretty much everything that we do. When Alice asked me to come talk a little bit about this tonight, I think I basically said this is such old news because after Sandy, we were definitely in at CB1 and all of the community boards giving updates on getting the park put back together again at that point. And there were a lot of federal, state, and city initiatives that obviously came out of that. So some of this may be familiar for some people, and there's not like any new news to report. This is more just kind of an overview, and we're definitely happy to answer anybody's questions. I guess the first thing to say is that Sandy hit the park, hit New York City, and that increased people's awareness for sure of how we build along the Hudson River. But in a sense, Hudson River Park had to deal with that before then. A couple of defining aspects of the park I think are important to understand for understanding resiliency measures. One is that unlike the east side, our bulkhead is historic. 4 miles of bulkhead are historic. It was apparently there's a Civil War general, General McClellan, who apparently was not a very successful general, but he was a good engineer. So the bulkhead, while not entirely original to the post-Civil War era, is historic because, in part, of the unique engineering that he initiated, but also because New York City consciously decided to put a lavish face facing all of the ships that were coming into the piers at that point. New York City wanted to make a statement that it was a wealthy city, and so that's why our bulkhead is granite in the older parts of it in particular, and it's rather unique. So the bulkhead is historic, which means we can't just put anything on top of it. And also the adjacent highway.
Is it landmarked?
It is not a city landmark. It's state and national eligible for the state and national registers of historic places.
eligible?
eligible.
Ever
But-
applied for?
Sorry?
Has it ever been applied for?
We applied to get it to be eligible, and it's treated, it's a protected resource because the way that the Army Corps permit works is if something's eligible, it's tantamount to being protected. So there's actually, I have to contact the State Historic Preservation Office whenever we're going to be doing construction on or adjacent to the bulkhead. So it's the equivalent, really. The other thing is that the planning for the highway, Route 9A, preceded the planning for Hudson River Park. And the highway is designed so that if lots of water comes onto the highway, it grades, the water comes off back over the bulkhead and into the Hudson River. So you can't think about the park in isolation from thinking about the highway in terms of any walls and other things like that. So that's kind of an initial setting issue. The piers and things, because they have to meet the bulkhead, are all, to a degree, predominantly, the pier elevations are established by the bulkhead elevations. And things like Americans with Disability Act, where you can't obviously have huge steps up in order to, access a pier. So we have these core building blocks that were put in place a long time ago when we started building the park that are the setting for this topic. After Sandy, there were kind of 3 initiatives on the federal, state, and city levels to try to think about, I'm going to just talk selfishly about the west side of Manhattan at the moment. The first one, as far as I'm aware, is the Rebuild by Design effort, which was the HUD effort. And one of the concepts that emerged from that was something called the Big U. You're probably experts in this, I'm not, but the idea initially was to have kind of a protection measures that made a U with the small part, the closed part of the U down at the Battery and the open parts moving up both sides of the river. Over time that became more like the Big J, with the majority of the effort focused on the east side. We were part of the conversations about the west side, though, and those were conversations that happened quite early after Sandy. And among the topics that came up were, frankly, the struggle that the architects and everybody, the engineers that were involved in that, had in trying to imagine how this could work on the west side. It's a narrow land area, the reasons that I just gave you. If you were to create a big berm, you would basically be blocking everybody's views of the water. From the inland community, you would be affecting potentially the bikeway. You would not be protecting all of the piers in the park, so those would not have any protection measures in that scenario, and that's where most of our public open space is. One of the ideas that emerged at that point was thinking about whether the 9A medians, which we actually don't control, they're part of the state highway, could be deployed in any way for some kind of removable barrier system or something like that. I'm not frankly sure if that ever went much further. The conversations had to shift then from us to the State Department of Transportation, and I don't know if anybody is still talking to the State Department of Transportation about that.
Can you just go over that a little more? In comparing it to the east side, you're saying that there was a great, there were conversations, I assume, with the city about how certain things that were being promoted and provided on the east side might happen on the west side, and you're saying that they couldn't happen on the east side, or they simply...
I don't know. I don't know anything about what the east side is, but I do know that there are areas of the east side that aren't park, that are land, and a fair amount of it, like certain of the parks that are there, where there is potentially more room for berming than there is on the west side.
But the berming blocking a view corridor or access or view is the same on the west side as it is on the east side in terms of a problem.
I think the residents are closer on the west side than on the east side in certain cases, but I mean, this is not, we're agnostic as far as this goes. This is, these were questions that people were asking, and we weren't saying, no, you can't do this because of view blocking or whatever. There were just a series of questions that emerged from the various discussions. And we're not running the Big U, nor any of these other efforts, so I think that those questions are really for the people running those exercises. We were providing technical information about, you know, the bulkhead's historic, have you talked with state DOT yet? And as I said to you, Hudson River Park basically recognizes that if at some point the federal, state, or city governments decide that the highest priority for the city or a portion of the city is to do a barrier system or whatever, we're a recreational resource, we're a park. If protecting lives or other things becomes more important, that's what will be more important, and people will design whatever. In the meantime, we're not the people running those big programs, so, I really can't answer that in a different way.
And what was with the Department of Transportation, what was,
I don't
do you
know,
recall
we're
any
not.
kind of
No, I mean,
conversation
they-
or relationship?
No,
that was-
we told them, we said, we don't control that property, have you talked to the State Department of Transportation?
And that's,
I don't know if they
That's where
talked,
it's ended.
I don't know if it ended there because I wasn't in the room for that. So you'd have to talk to, the people at the Big U to ask them, did that go anywhere? And they may not have, for money or other reasons. I mean, obviously the effort did focus more towards the J concept of swinging it more towards the east, and there wasn't infinite money for this, so they may have decided to focus the first phase. I mean, I think that's kind of where it ended up. I think they tried to focus the first phase more on the east side and probably continue talking or planning.
so was the idea though when the water comes in or whatever, or flooding or such in the future, that the highway would simply just be, like it did, get flooded and the water comes into the park? I mean, that's just sort of
Basically-
accepted notion of how it would work for right now.
The park is designed basically for wet flood proofing. So there's no system that anyone, federal, state, or city, or us, has come up with at the moment is saying you can stop the water from coming in. And therefore, we have to design what we have in the park as best as possible to accept and be tolerant of flooding if and when it happens.
So when the Sandy flooding happened, how bad were the losses of your park?
Remarkably, not as bad as one would hope. So we designed, so the piers are the biggest dollar investment in the park, and our board established when we started a 50-year build. So structurally, basically everything was sound structurally. Our losses were for the most part, as you would guess, in mechanical and electrical equipment, which since Sandy, thanks to FEMA in very large measure, we have been able to elevate basically mechanicals, whatever we can that has an electrical part, as much as we can. By that I mean that there were a lot of small buildings already that we couldn't bust out the roofs on and build second stories. So for the most part, Graham's here, things like elevating things about 4 feet, I would say, would be typical in most of our small park buildings, park bathrooms, things like that. At a place like Pier 40, where we have major transformers and boilers and other things like that, and where the pier is frankly struggling and we're trying to figure out a long-term future for it, we had to make many more aggressive things like elevating transformers and boilers and some pretty expensive things, which is where a lot of the dollars went to Pier 40. We also, throughout the park, even though the electrical conduits, et cetera, throughout the park were supposed to be designed to be waterproof, we had problems with them. And once salt water gets on electrical things, it corrodes and it's bad. So we have put in, what is this? I got re-prepped on this today. Over 1,000 new gel packs around splices at various electrical conduits throughout the length of the park to try to make sure that we're more waterproof in terms of the electrical systems. So, those are the kinds
So
of things
that would
we
mean
did.
that, does that mean that the city of New York or the state of New York has declared the Hudson River Park resilient now?
No one has declared anything.
I mean, are you, how did they decide 4 feet?
They didn't. With FEMA wouldn't reimburse us unless they thought that the plan was sensible. But there's no standard of saying you're resilient or you're not. So basically, FEMA process, if you don't know it, I hope you don't ever have to know it, but it's incredibly laborious. You have to identify the work you think you're going to do and the work that you're going to do. You have to do estimates for it. You have to describe it. They have people that assess it. I mean, it's our collective taxpayer money. You kind of want it to be spent wisely, you hope. So FEMA has reimbursed us thus far. I'm not the financial person, but I'd say about 20-something million out of the probably 34 million at least that we've spent on resiliency measures post Sandy. The other thing, the landscape actually fared very well. We had intentionally had salt-tolerant plants from the get-go for the most part. There are a few ornamental things that are not, but mostly the plants did well. There were a few lost trees. One of the things that we did was put fresh water onto our landscape as soon as possible after the water receded, and that we think was a big help. Yeah.
So there were I've read different figures on that. There were like around $34 million
Yeah, I think
lost.
so, yeah.
Sometimes like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And mostly for what you're describing, mechanical, excuse me, and electrical.
Mostly things related to that, yeah.
So if the same type of storm were to hit next week, the idea is that what's in place now would survive that.
That's certainly the hope.
I guess that my question
But as everyone knows, I mean, just to say,
Yeah.
I think everyone's talked about that, Sandy wasn't the absolute worst case scenario storm that happened. But there are, Hudson River Park was created by a state law that defines where it is, which piers are in it. Most of it was built beforehand. An individual pier costs $30 million, and the electrical piece, while expensive, is a smallish subset of that. So I'm not in any way minimizing the effect of $34 million of damage on the park, but the basic structural systems, including that historic bulkhead, for the most part, were intact.
Can you describe at all what, if you were around at the time, what the rebuild by design idea was for?
I can't in good enough detail to do that for you.
Or just a general idea?
It was.
No, I understand the big view, but I mean just for the Hudson River Park Trust portion of it.
There wasn't. It never got to that point. It got to a concept that in some way you could protect a large portion of Manhattan if you had some kind of barriers, and then the question was, where were you going to put the barriers?
Right.
And the detail is kind of somewhat stalled as far as I'm aware at that point.
So, but would it be happening on Hudson River Park, if somebody went to go to do this, if somebody decides, let's
It's
start.
unclear, though we had suggested that had anyone looked at, for example, the medians. And if you put a berm in Hudson River Park on the Esplanade, that could be fine, but you basically lost the park.
Right.
That's about as wide as the park is.
Right.
So if people collectively at some point decide that that's the answer, that's the answer. But we pointed out that there were existing medians in 9A that had partial walls and partial openings in various places, and one of the things we asked was, has anyone looked at whether those could be adapted in some way?
What can be adapted?
The medians,
You mean in the middle of the
In the
road,
middle of
in
the
the middle of
road, yeah.
9A?
right,
Really?
just, and that, by the way, doesn't save the park. That probably may hurt the park more because it keeps more water on the park side than on the inland side. And again, as I said, at some point we're a recreational, there are about 3,000 people who work in the park. That's not insignificant. There's jobs and businesses and people who would, who want the park to exist, and hopefully lots of recreational users too. But we are not the same as a place where people live. Nobody lives in the park. If at some point somebody decides that it's more important to alter the park in favor of a better, greater good, that's not ours to decide.
I'm just gonna, who else is here for this item? I want to make sure that everybody gets heard about, because we've spoken about this, and we have a full room of people who want to see item 3.
Yeah.
So, and I know this gentleman had a
I'm guessing
question,
this was not
so
for me.
please ask your, now open it to the, can we open it to the public on this topic?
Jason, we're getting a full presentation. This is.
Oh, I thought this was
crit-
the end of it.
I don't know if it should, Nori Stan, I appreciate your perspective on this, but this is a critical part of today's
don't
agenda
disagree.
that we've waited for, I would argue, for over a year. So I'm delighted
disagree.
to it, and I'm sorry that you're all waiting around. You can come back in 15 minutes if you need to, but that's the way community board meetings work.
Can we
So-
change it to item 2, this 250 Water Street, in light of the fact that all these people who have kids waiting outside couldn't see, as a request of a board member? Is that a possible thing? Do we do that?
It's
up to the board,
That's
it's
up to the
chair.
presiding
I would.
officer.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting
Okay,
topic.
I'm gonna, I'll give it some thought.
Good.
I appreciate your point. I'd like to now resume what the point of this meeting in part was, a very important point. 250 Water Street is certainly critical and has also been addressed in a number of meetings as well. This is the first time we're hearing from the Hudson River Park Trust on their resiliency initiatives, and I hope you all are finding it as interesting and important as some of us are. So anyway, moving on, Noreen, thank you. Continuing your presentation.
Sure. So, rebuild it by design, I mean, basically, each of these three, we are a small cog in a bigger thing, and so I can't really answer all of your questions on each of, the intent and where exactly they are. I can only tell you kind of what things we touch. The state's initiative was something called New York Rising, and I know Catherine McVeigh Hughes has been very, very involved in that one. And that one, again, was primarily a lower Manhattan initiative, and we, as far as I know, are an official part of that one. There was a gap identified in the kind of barrier system that was being discussed between Stuyvesant High School and our southernmost basketball court. And we said that we would be fine with a concept to change part of the wall that's at the basketball court, and so to be able to support a new wall or barrier that would be placed there if that project advances. And I don't actually know where that project is at this point. And then,
Was that deemed to be a very vulnerable section that where a lot of the water poured in?
it's not so much us, it's more the inland community. So I think that one of the designers who worked on New York Rising, Matthews Nielsen, Sydney Nielsen lives locally, and she is very familiar with the park. She actually designed that area of the park. As I understand it, they had figured out ways in most of the area that this was covering to actually act as an inland protection system, except for this gap, or this was one of the key gaps. So by closing this gap, more protection could be provided to a larger area. That's my understanding of it.
What's the department in the state that was doing this?
I think the governor created a separate resiliency group for that, I believe. Nicolette, actually, my colleague Nicolette Lucher was most involved directly in talking with all of these folks. And then Rashi is currently representing us at the New York City Climate Change Adaptation Task Force. And I know you're involved with that one as well. But,
Should I just
yeah, you
give
wanna
a-
just, yeah.
Yeah, so the task force was set up in 2015 really to look at different infrastructure in the city which is at risk of climate change. So different city, state agencies have been involved, and also certain private entities as stakeholders. So basically we've been holding a lot of meetings. Hudson River Park is a part of some of the meetings that were held, and basically to see that how we can exchange information, we can coordinate how to save this infrastructure. So really this is an in-progress task force. There is a report which is being put together which is supposed to come out in the first quarter of 2019, and that will have recommendations about different design standards on how to mitigate effects of climate change, specifically on certain infrastructure involving different city agencies.
So
that's
that
something we should
includes the
adopt.
whole big U or the?
No, this
what?
actually includes the entire New York City, so it's
So it's a
certain-
mayor's office initiative.
Yeah,
so
so
it's the office
all the
of,
boroughs and,
Yes.
resiliency and recovery of the mayor's office, which is really leading this effort. So it's the entire New York City, but they have focused on certain neighborhoods and in Manhattan as well as in Queens and the Bronx. So it's like specific neighborhoods have been focused, but really the focus is on infrastructure related with telecommunication, with energy, transportation, and just how we can all be coordinated in this effort.
is Lower Manhattan one of the neighborhoods?
Yes, I mean not Lower Manhattan, but Chelsea actually, a little bit north. Yeah.
But not
I mean
Tip?
the focus area, one of the focus areas is Chelsea. Lower Manhattan is talked about a lot, and that is going to be part of the report that comes out. But they do have specific priority neighborhoods.
No, I
What are
think
we,
it's
Chuck?
not, I mean, I've not been directly involved as much, but I don't think they're considering it priority neighborhoods. I think they're calling them test case scenarios. So I think that they were looking at neighborhoods that otherwise weren't being looked at as much, I think.
Right. Yeah, so, sorry, it's not priority neighborhoods, it's really a test case because they have looked at the entire New York City to be able to test certain areas. They have looked at different areas which will be part of it.
And
So-
how did they come up with the test case?
It was really, I mean, we were
weren't
not
part-
part of it. We were not part
We're
of
not
it.
part of the methodology for that. So again, I mean, I think that they're looking at different neighborhoods with, more transformers. And I mean, I think they were trying to consider different types of parts of the city with different physical characteristics, not just people characteristics.
But was it maybe driven by flood maps? This
I'm
kind
sure
of
that
thing?
there were flood maps,
Flood maps
for sure,
as
but-
well as heat islands. I mean, so there were like different, because it's not only flooding, it's also heat islands, which is a problem.
Certainly true.
Looking at different issues and then looking at test cases.
But we're, there are 50 agencies part of this?
Yeah, we are just one of the participants and we are not driving it, so
Can you
I
explain
can't
the
say
heat
more.
island?
Sorry?
Like heat
Heat
island?
island.
Yeah, so heat island is really when certain areas which are landlocked and not near water become too heated up. So that's the different problem to water surge. But that's also related with climate change. So it's like related with global warming. But so it's really hitting on different issues that come up because of climate change.
Was there any public input to the process
Not
of that
yet,
group?
not yet.
So that they have to write their report and then CB1 might get it and
We
then
don't
we
know.
think about it.
As I said, I don't know. Right now, it's just been a couple of around 50 city and state agencies involved.
How many meetings?
It's a mayor's office initiative. I mean, we really can't speak for what
What
their
they're up to.
rollout plan is.
So what is the relationship of the trust to the Office of Resiliency, Recovery and Resiliency?
One of many agencies that they talk to. I mean, that's,
And what about, for example, work that's being done in Battery Park City? Having a rep here.
No.
Hey, how are you,
So
Nicholas?
sort of nice timing as you entered, just in terms of their efforts and where they're ending and where you begin and the sort of, is there any relationship that's?
Well, they're courteous neighbors and come and gave us a preview of what their plans are, and we said, great, we really appreciate that. And at some point, as they develop their ideas more for the kind of northern area, we'd like to understand what, if any additional water might come our way. And, they generously promise to kind of keep us in the loop as far as that goes. So, we're neighbors that talk to each other about a lot of different kinds of things, but their initiative is different from us. And their park, the fact that they have thousands of residents and businesses as opposed to us, they're just different kinds of settings.
Okay.
And then, sorry, I have two
Yeah,
other
please,
quick, I
go
am
ahead.
sensitive to time, I'm sorry, but
No,
I know
it's
you're
fine.
not rushing, but there's a new-ish, not so much a new idea, but there is a newish effort that the Army Corps is leading at the moment about the idea of flood barriers. This is something that a number of citizens kind of were proponents for it, to put a major infrastructure maybe at the Narrows or, you know, in other places to try literally to stop ocean water as much, or at least a lot of it from coming on in. There's a huge version of that, and there are smaller versions of that, west side barriers or whatever. So the Army Corps is in the very, very beginning stages of what they, you know, they have to do a formal scoping process, and they actually involve citizens in participating in that. If you want to look at the Army Corps website locally, I'm sure you'd be able to find information on that. I know that Catherine McVeigh Hughes was at one of the recent meetings on that, so I know that the word is out to people that are somewhat following this issue. I will say that we have no position on this at this point. There are people that, I think on the environmental community, there are people that are concerned about habitat impacts and other things if certain of these schemes advance, and then there are other people that obviously feel really strongly that protecting people is the highest priority, and so it's very, very beginning stages of a long process.
Just to add to that, Hudson River Foundation, which is down in Battery, had a lecture on that, an early study on the tide changes, and it would be a very dramatic change to tide flow in the harbour, with some interesting consequences for New York City's water supply. We have an emergency inlet in Poughkeepsie. So the Army Corps will do the proper study, but the initial study is that barrier, which was at Breezy Point, that's the only obvious place to put it, would dramatically change the harbour.
Yeah, and these are big ideas and long-term plans. I mean, I think that's just, you know, and really expensive, and it's not clear for any of them who has all the money and how these would all happen. And then we have also applied, and this may interest Richard as an example, for things like ecological resiliency features. And we've applied for grants for things like measures on bulkheads to kind of perhaps be able to absorb some of the force from water, or reduce storm surge. Those ideas, I don't think there's anyone that thinks that they reduce flooding, but they may potentially reduce the effects of some storm surge. We have not gotten any of those grants, but as we look at things like, it's not in CD1, but as our Gansevoort edge, our southern edge, you know, we'll be trying to think of ideas about living shorelines and other things and ways to build ecologically sound features that are also resilient.
Well, so can you give an example of one, like are there, I don't know what this, I mean, forgive me, but absorbative bulkheads, what is that, how does that translate into something?
There's a project in Staten Island that's known as the Living Shoreline. That is probably the example that would be best to look at.
And just, so
It's engineered materials in the water, designed intentionally to try to absorb some of the force from storm surge.
And is the trust applied for
We have
grants?
applied and we did not get them, but we keep at it.
And why wouldn't you, just the need wasn't
They
considered?
picked Staten Island because Staten Island probably got
Oh,
really
over,
worse.
right.
I can't.
Who's offering the grants?
There
Federal?
were federal ones. That was a few years ago, a federal program.
I can answer that. The south shore of Staten Island is glacial tilt, so it's rapidly eroding away. So they just need to stop the wave action on the south shore. And the act of dredging the Ambrose Channel, which provides shipping access to New York Harbor, changed the flow of sand again across the south shore of Staten Island. So if they don't do something, you lose the whole south shore.
Your point being that this is more critical at
Well,
this juncture,
we
right?
Well, from a
don't
grant
have- we
maker's
don't have that
perspective,
problem.
Yeah, of
perhaps
course,
they
right.
thought so.
No, it's interesting that the best known
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
right?
But you know, we tried to do lots of things creatively to support habitat. I hope at some point, since I think it seems like it's under your agenda or auspices for the committee topic, we're so proud of our composting program. We're doing lots of other good environmental related things besides this kind of resiliency topic, where we are directly the people doing it, and can provide more, you know, direct answers rather than saying, you know, we're a small piece of a bigger issue.
Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the development that's going on in terms of how that would answer to any questions about, for example, St. John's Terminal and all of that, that will go right across the street from where you are? Is there any sort of involvement in terms of environmental conscientious building technologies or ways to avoid flooding and such?
Well, we don't
That won't be
control
part of
any
it.
of that.
No.
I mean, the designer of that particular building, Rick Cook, is, I think, a leading acknowledged designer for ecological, green-related buildings. I think that I'd be shocked if they don't have measures that are, that advance the conversation.
And that would be true on whatever happens on Pier 40 and.
Well, if something happens at Pier 40, so right now there's,
Or
you know,
Pier 26.
Pier 26 is a public, there's no building there, so that's in the category of build smart. But
right.
there's no building on Pier 26 for what we're building now.
And are there any, you talked about things in front of the city winery and certain buildings that you have, these are just deployables, or what is
So,
that goes in place?
if anyone wants to see, on February 26th is the 4th annual test of the deployable flood barrier system at Pier 26 at City Winery. So, you're welcome to come see that in
What's
action.
the date?
February 26th.
Is that the only one there is in the park, or?
The only one that we directly control, as part of the Pier 57 project, which is another historic property where Google is the master subtenant, RXR and Youngwoo are the developers. They have a different type of system that's called a Tiger Dam. It's a dam inflated with water if needed during a storm condition. It's historic, so they weren't allowed to do just anything, but they elevated some of the walls on their perimeter by their doors in order to kind of have a little bit more height there too.
So does the trust end at the pier, and then anything on top of it is what would then be the purview of the developer in that area?
No, they're our tenant, so they have lease conditions. I mean, they have a lease with us, so our
Right.
purview is still part of that. And we we were the first project to go through ULURP, that project. I went to City Planning Commission to get certified for that project in ULURP while the lights were still out at City Planning after Sandy. So it was a hot and heavy topic on everybody's mind, a big new office and retail building in a historic structure on the water when the lights were still out after Sandy. So believe me, there was a lot of conversation about how would this work.
Right, and so it's the trust responsibility, the Tiger Dams and such to
No,
apply? No,
it's their responsibility under the lease.
Okay, got it, all right. I have a lot of questions, obviously, sorry. Opening it up to any of the members of the public who are,
First, let me thank you and your team for the incredible efforts and time that you put into this.
Thank you.
I think, I sit here very frustrated with the lack of visible project as far as the big U or segments thereof. But it's great to know that somebody is in the trenches, and I thank you and your team for what you've done. I come here as a homeowner in a district called the Historic Seaport. And I had the fortunate opportunity to hear Mr. Goodall, who wrote the Water Will Come book. And if one has not read that, I recommend that as just a piece in this chess game that's being played. Because he is prescient in his comments throughout, and so I'm a lay person. I don't come here with any great knowledge, as opposed to the person next to me who sounds like he is. But I am concerned about the coordination of this. This is huge, and there's a lot of spinning tops and wheels, but I don't have any feel what little I've tried of coordination and prioritization, and Sandy was a while ago. I sit here and say, with that amount of time, it's very frustrating for me to hear that certain people are involved in this, but there's not coordination of information and prioritization of effort. And there's another factor here, and that is this is hugely expensive, both from a study standpoint, and if you have too many players with not enough money, without prioritization ahead of time, Um, I commend you for the time, but you must be one of the most frustrating people on this planet. And I think that there has to be some better organization, and I take it all the way to the top, and this is a state and city problem. And I frankly do not think this has been adequately prioritized and organized. With that said, I think you mentioned players. And we have a situation here, whether it be FEMA or the Corps of Engineers, that have to be brought into the 21st century. FEMA, I have personally examples living in Tybee Island, Georgia, where FEMA builds to the prior existing. This is not about prior existing, this is about future. And so there has to be coordination with FEMA to get us into the 21st century, and the Corps, because they are an important player in this chess game. But to go back to your point, having done the frustration on FEMA, it doesn't meet the time of where we are, which is future planning. Who is running the big J or U? Just one simple.
I believe that the initial initiative was primarily HUD, because it was HUD money that was anticipated to implement this. So that would be Ben Carson. What I would say is that you'd be asking Congressman Nadler. I mean, from a practical perspective, what I would do to follow up with your question as a resident of the city and the west, this area, is to follow up with Congressman Nadler to ask for the federal government, the relevant agency in federal government, to give an update on the big J. I mean, Nick, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you know anything more? Is it HUD as far as you're aware, the last you heard?
I think, what I would say is that from a city perspective, there's the Mayor's Office of Recovery, Nick Sportnow from the Battery Park
Thank
City
you.
Authority. Hello, everyone. At a city level, it's the Mayor's Office of Recovery and Resiliency have been running point on a lot of the projects. But like with anything else, with the size and the scope of what the big U, I think, aspires to be, instead of just doing it all at once, it's going to be broken up into digestible pieces. So the first wave, I believe, no pun intended, was supposed to run from 23rd Street down to Montgomery Street. That was about $108 million that was allocated for that. I don't know if that's going to cover the entirety of the project. It may only cover the design and the research, but that was going on. And there has been a recent amount of updates or coverage on what's known as the East Side Resiliency Project, which I'm sure you've seen. It was a story in the Times. At first, they had thought through many years of community input that they were going to simply make some changes to East River Park. Recently, from what the reportage has shown, they've kind of reevaluated that plan, and now simply going to build over East River Park and consider closing parts of it down. So the mayor's office is involved there. There is obviously some federal funding. Over on the west side, Noreen had obviously noted that they're doing some things in Hudson River Park, and up in Battery Park City, we as an authority are underway with 4 different resiliency initiatives to both compartmentalize Battery Park City, but also to tie into other existing projects that may be coming down the pipe. We're of the mind that it doesn't make much sense to kind of just block the water off and have it go elsewhere. We want to make sure that if it comes in, it is obviously being stopped at whatever we build, but then whatever we build would tie into resiliency portions, which is why if you look at some of the things that we have afoot, and we can exchange information. I can send you the information on our site where it is. Around the southern end of Battery Park City, we envision actually building beyond what our project scope is and coming out down along State Street to get to the high water mark. So if water were to come in through Battery Place and out all the way to State Street. So if the water were to come in, it would then it would meet the high point, so it wouldn't just then flow around, but the barrier would be there. Along the north end, when we get to that, we just got responses to the RFP this week, and we'll be commencing the design project probably in a couple of months' time. That's design, not the construction, that's further down the path. We would imagine then coming behind Stuyvesant High School, crossing West Street, syncing up with where Hudson River Park Trust meets, and BMCC, which is Oregon Hat Community College, and other players to make sure that that ties into resiliency measures they have. So, long answer to a short question, there is philosophically one big U. I think on the ground what you're seeing is a series of smaller projects led with varying degrees of success by different entities. But at a city level, certainly ORR, Mayor's Office of Recovery and Resiliency, should be kind of the point for you in the city's efforts. And then if it comes to what we're doing in Battery Park City, I'm happy to connect with you and the team. We've been in close touch with the Battery Park City Committee. Environmental protection is now on my list to come to every month since its own standing committee, which is great. So we're going to continue working through that as well. So it's a number of different players. But the city, for sure, Mayor's
Yeah,
Office
and
us.
to your point, I mean, I can only imagine what it's like to try to collect all this information, but I do think that if you, I mean, community boards are of the city. Your first step should be with the city to try to get them to give you a comprehensive sense of where this is.
I do have some news there, which
Oh.
has become a bit of a joke because month after month we
this
meet
is
and there's no
Ah,
news.
I see.
But for the J portion in our district, it is overseen by the Mayor's Office of Recovery and Resiliency. That's the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency portion of the U, now the J. We were supposed to have quarterly meetings with the city so they could give us updates on the project. It's been this month a year since we've had the last task force
Right.
meeting, and we kept pushing and pushing to get an update. We were supposed to have the last task force meeting in the summer, and the mayor's office kept telling us that they had to wait to brief the mayor before they could have a task force meeting. He's not that busy. So it's been months, but I just learned today that they said they were getting ready to brief the mayor and they should be giving us an update in March. But
Wow.
the project is supposed to be completed, the design phase anyway. We don't have anywhere near enough money for construction anyway, but they were supposed to be completed with the design phase this spring. And it seems to have basically stagnated and nobody's heard anything, which is alarming. But we should at least next month.
So, just that's good news here that we were all on record hearing that we're going to hear something next month. We've been here for years. So if I'm understanding, having Nick and you two in the room at the same time is kind of helpful. There, if I'm understanding this correctly, there really are no plans for resiliency that you're aware of in the Hudson River Park, outside of the deployables that you've described.
Resiliency means for the inland or for us? Because I think you actually have to be clear
Right.
on what
Right.
question you're asking.
Well, I guess
Flood protection inland, that's what you're aiming at,
yes, that's
right?
what we're
Flood
talking.
and they have nothing to
Inland.
do with
Right.
it.
So
Yes.
that is
Not
not,
there.
we are not working on that. That is beyond our mission.
Right.
And that is.
But that's you are working on that as your mission.
Partly.
Not above.
No,
Yeah, but
right,
yes.
in Battery
Yes,
Park
of course.
City.
Right.
So I guess that's what's confusing to me, and then the East River Park is also,
No, East
part
River
of-
Park isn't working on that. That's part of the city initiative.
Right.
East River Park may be
Well, the
affected
city
by
is-
it, which would be like us.
right.
Right.
So ideally, would the Hudson River Park Trust want to have the city involved in,
They are involved because we're a participant
They
in
don't
the
have to.
task force. I mean, but
yeah,
I guess to say this a different way, again, Battery Park City has thousands of residents, thousands of office workers, and a huge income stream. And it's in a very
Of course.
different, and it's in a concentrated area. For Hudson River Park, just Pier 25 is 990 feet long by something like 160 feet by 990 feet long. And that, jigsaws like that all the way up 4 miles. So for us, the west side is 4 miles, not a concentrated geographic area. And so to the extent the city or the state or the federal government, needs the property for something,
You're there.
that's your question.
right. All right. do you feel there's a role for the public to play in terms of advocacy in doing something with the trust
I
land,
think
other
that
than
at
what
the
they're doing?
moment, we got, I mean, our elected officials have all been great in terms of trying to get us support and back on our feet and money in different ways. So that would normally be something I'd be asking community boards for help with. I would say that if you learn things, sometimes you might learn things before we do because we are not directly the city or the state. So that's really helpful. So if you get your meeting and you learn something,
I'm sure you'll be there sometime.
Give you a call.
yeah, that'd be great.
We'll let you know, right.
I go with Pam and Linda Hellstrom.
51 years, yay.
What's your name?
And Linda Hellstrom.
Oh,
And
You're-
yes. She told us to come.
oh, well, she's,
Along with a lot of other people. I guess I just want a general question, because I'm here as a resident on the east side, on the seaport. When I go to meetings like this and you get a part of it and you all, and thank goodness you're chairing a committee that has that name, sustainability, and you're looking at these things and environment. Can you sort of tell us, and your answer about things that are being done, and the U and the J and all of that, to a layman, it seems like lots of little bits and pieces are working on lots of little things, and then when you say 17 commissions are a part of that one meeting and another person, are there any, and urgency is gone now that Sandy was gone, money's involved. Can anybody assure me that somebody big and really knowledgeable is sort of trying to pull all this together? And are people going to Amsterdam to interview people over there? And are people looking for big ideas? And are we just treading water, talking, and we'll be talking 10 years from now? I guess just as an overall question, is there any assurance that any
it's a key question. I mean, we have been grappling with it. It's one of the reasons why we set up this committee
I know,
on our
I'm so
community
glad.
board to try to begin, and why we're so thankful we're agencies and representatives from agencies who normally never would have to answer these questions are coming in, and why we thankfully see these issues on the front page of our paper of record. You know, it took me a year, and I'm still not there, to figure out all the different agencies that are involved and all. I mean, I do think that, well, you would better answer this because you've been working on it for so many years as to, you know, how we're going forward in terms of trying to engage with the city. I mean, my sense is our biggest mission right now on the local level is to have the city speak to us about where they're at, and we have waited a long time, and that's really, I think, the key piece here. We hear from the Battery Park City Authority often, and it's terrific. They're totally engaged. I'm not saying everything is terrific, but the unbelievable efforts that they make to engage them. So that piece, yes. But then you're right. We haven't heard from Parks about the battery, and we wouldn't mind knowing. Of course, this is now what we learned at the Hudson River Park, which basically is nothing's really there except for this beautiful park, thank God, and you know, hopefully it sustains itself in some way. And we don't know what will happen at the entire western portion of the lower Manhattan. That's still up for grabs as to how that gets solved. So I think, you know, you're right. It's very piecemeal, and the only thing we can do is have each agency come in and be made aware that the public is watching them, wants to know what they're doing, and is very, very concerned. And ultimately, I don't know, you know, ultimately
But
more
wouldn't
and
you
more.
say that if there is one agency that has overall responsibility, it's the mayor's office
Absolutely. Yeah.
of recovery and resiliency?
Really.
But even superseding that in a way is Army Corps of Engineers, which has the broadest scope and is looking at this
But
all.
only in terms of one project.
They're looking at the whole thing, and they're analyzing. There's 8,000 projects in the New York
But-
City
but
built
they-
by design. All of those are part of the analysis of the Army Corps.
That's not what I understood.
But they were in
It's a
here.
fact.
They were
They were
in
From
here
their
and they
presentation.
reported to us on what they've done and what they're doing. And they also said, please pressure the people who tell us what to do.
I mean,
Because they
Exactly.
can't do it without us banging the
Right.
drum on on our electeds to light the fire so that they can do their research, because otherwise they don't have the resources to do the research, and they can't even ask the questions.
Right, so the Corps, in their mandate, is incredibly limited about what they are allowed to do without an explicit authorization. So you just said something, I mean, I haven't asked this particular question of the Corps, but that makes total sense to me and the 100 other ways that I work with them on. So your congressman, just citizen comments saying, please keep doing that study, that matters. And also just think of it, the Army Corps gets their money from federal government, which doesn't uniformly, you know, there's different opinions about where the money should go, right? So, so I think that it's, you know, on the Army Corps side, that's well said. I just will make one other comment, which is that when you finally get your city presentation, the amount of thought and detail being asked of each agency is very impressive. In terms of like what they're trying to do to have a comprehensive picture, not just of a storm surge, but heat and all kinds of other things. If you imagine like the different missions that Housing and Preservation Development and the New York City Parks and the New York City Department of Transportation and the, you know, the Con Ed, like everybody has a different set of expertise and information to bring to a big picture resiliency discussion, and that is what they're trying to collect from people. So while I well appreciate that you last had a meeting a year ago and that's frustrating, I think when you do get to talk to them and they explain like the depth of what they're trying to do, it doesn't seem like it's moving fast, but it's a lot of information. I haven't seen it, but I know that that's the intent.
Do we, as just citizens, I mean, we got into our building after Sandy, but the people in the building were waiting up to here with water. So, does it matter, is there some way that CB1 can tell people when it's appropriate, that we need to get lots of people to the meeting to tell the officials and remind them what Sandy was like, so that we can help you? So that you keep us informed that when you need us, we can try to help.
That's very lovely, and yes, indeed, we do need much more of that, and we need much more noise, we need much more public involvement on this issue. It's always like 100 years ago, Sandy, you know, we all forget what it was like, you know, we were also flooded out in my building. You know, it's easy to forget, and the minute that happens again, it'll become the issue of the day. But until that happens, everyone kind of floats around, if you will. And I think we have to, it's thankful to the community efforts and everybody's effort to keep these things alive by working on what they work on. And so, yeah, we will certainly, you know, through this committee and other initiatives, try to keep everybody informed and beat the drama and beat it loudly. And yes, putting it on the front page of the New York Times is helpful, you know, making sure that every political elected is very aware of these concerns is, in our own local arena, is really key, I would say, which is what you were pointing out.
Could we maybe suggest that we get an advocacy listserv going or email generated with concerned community members who will sign up for it, so that when it's an action alert, you know, we can post, we can send an email out to everybody and say, okay, there's a MoveOn.org, you know, petition we created, you know, can you go do it? What is the legality? Are we allowed to do things like that?
You can do that.
Yeah, there's always a way to do
Is there something we can do?
The closest thing right now is our community board email list, but if you sign up for that, you're going to be getting a lot of notices.
Get ready.
Get ready.
Can we
I send out loads of
section
those
it out so that
notices.
we have a separate
I don't
list?
see why we couldn't. I think that would actually be a really useful thing, especially because it is really difficult to know with so many organizations when something is something you should be paying attention to, and there's so much going on, and it's really difficult. The next best opportunity will be whenever the next Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Task Force meeting is. Those are always paired with a public meeting with the mayor's office, and that would be the next best thing.
I think, to your point, trying to get back to a parking lot in the middle,
Oh, to my point, I like that.
there is nothing that doesn't get touched by this issue. as well.
Yes, that is a resiliency
And
issue also.
As a result of that, you have developers who are aware of this issue and are rushing, my humble opinion, to get ahead of that wave. Whether it be building specs, sustainability as to the type of building they should and would build now in the 21st century. The stuff that's going on in Miami, you should all be aware of, are draconian new regulations that are being put there. The real estate market is based on greed, it's based on money, and they get ahead of the last guy out in the little dance card gets screwed. So what you have here are interrelated aspects, in my humble opinion, that are very important to coordinate in the way of buffers and timing and some of the strategy, tactical and strategically, that this committee and more importantly the committee board one work. Because if I ask these top players, give me your definition of high water mark, I bet you I'm not going to get a single figure. You cannot build this project in any strategic way without all coordinating what a high water mark is.
Oh, are we actually talking about 250 Water Street now?
Yes, we are.
We're still
No,
talking.
I think,
know.
Madam Chairman, you.
We have to close,
authority.
we have to close this whole discussion before we start having public members talk about the
So thank
third
you, I
topic.
really appreciated your comment on that, that's really, you know,
All goes
right on. So I'm gonna ask if it's okay with you.
To come to another meeting.
No, we're fine, as long as you're okay to wait a little while longer and if your time allows us to move
Yeah,
the other.
I'm gonna have to go. I'm happy to come back another time. I didn't.
No,
Oh,
then
no,
we're
no, we're gonna see you.
then I'm sorry, we will have to continue with the same, we waited many months to have, Ellen join us, so forgive us. The agendas are very clear, we didn't change the timing of the agenda, so anyone here should have been aware this would be the third agenda item.
I'll go
So-
very quickly.
No,
Thank you for
that's
having
okay.
us.
Oh, Noreen, thank you, both of you, very, very much, I really appreciate it, it was terrific.
Are we gonna be able to draft a resolution out of the third agenda item tonight? Is that possible?
No,
We
it's not
cannot make a
approved.
resolution
Don't even
if
have a
it's not a
quorum.
presentation. Oh, because we don't have
Don't
a
even,
quorum.
don't even have that.
If we had a quorum, could we have done that?
If we had,
I
I'd
mean,
like Diana to speak
we
to
can always adopt a resolution. We're kind of in between, actually, I mean, Anthony did a chairperson's letter.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if a resolution would kind of be crossing those channels a little bit. It's the first, comment window in a process that has a handful of comment windows.
we'll share that, is that a public document yet, Anthony?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
was
that you
just
can see-
waiting until we got there.
I don't know if you've seen
The
that
thing is
yet,
that
but-
March 6th, just so you,
Yeah.
March 6th is the
Yeah, they
common
extended.
deadline,
Let's
so
write a resolution. Why
any
can't we do that?
comments are gonna go in, it has to be from this month's meetings.
There's
And
no
we have a
reason-
lot of community members here to express their opinions
Right.
about it. So if we can't, as a community board, come together and
Well,
write
this
something.
issue was taken up at land use.
I
had-
know, Alice, I know that. We have a new community board committee. There's 20 people here. Let's get something out of the meeting, right? That's my kind of, as a member who comes to a lot of meetings. And maybe Tom
Okay, so
second
we
that.
will get to that next, thanks, Jason,
Yes,
that's
the
helpful
intent,
to
I would
hear.
tone down just a
Tone
little bit
down
on
a little
that,
bit,
because
maybe.
I think that
So
Alice is
Ellen,
not hostile to it, but.
Okay, great.
Onyx Dock, did I have that
that's
right?
perfect.
The Director of Education of the Urban Green Council, really glad that you've come, really appreciate it, sorry about all the sort of
That's right, we've been trying to plan this
derailment,
for 4 months.
but I really appreciate your time
I'm talking to
and,
Sam.
take it away and.
Okay, thanks. So we're neighbors. We're at 55 Broad. We're Urban Green Council, the New York affiliate of the U.S. Green Building Council, and we wanted to introduce ourselves and be a resource to you. Our mission is to transform New York City buildings for a sustainable future. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the 80 by 50 plan, so I don't necessarily need to go into detail, but the idea is to reduce the city's energy emissions 80% by 2050. And in New York City, because of our transportation sector, 67% of our emissions come from buildings. So if you're gonna tackle emissions in New York City, you have to talk buildings, right?
Ellen, can you just
Yes.
describe a little bit about Urban Green Council?
Yes.
You're getting to, okay.
So
good,
we're,
yeah.
I'm not sure if I am, actually, so I'll just,
Introduce you.
yes. So, we're a nonprofit organization, we're small, we do research, we do policy work, and we do education. I'm actually gonna describe some of the things, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. So, are any of you involved in green building, high performance building, pass, any of that stuff? Okay, so you all know that to build a high performance building, you need to, the entire team has to work together, right? It's much more connected and synergistic than, you know, a conventional building. So to green New York City's buildings, we have to reach the entire industry, and we do. Half our audience is architects and engineers, the other half is government and consultants and green builders and all the other folks, people in finance, everyone else that's necessary to create high performance buildings. So we've been around for about 15 years, and in the last 10 years or so, we've produced 29 reports, many of which sounds like the kinds of things that you all are talking about would be of interest to you. Energy efficient products. We do the reports about the annual benchmarking, so we can see how the buildings are doing in the city. We've been involved with the passing of 68 laws, you know, changing out the number 6 oil, for example, things like that. Because if you're going to do research about green building and you're going to advocate for policy, the only way you're going to get that to work is through education. So we've trained over 16,000 people in construction practices, contractors, plumbers, electricians, folks like that. And we've also trained another 3,500 people, architects and engineers, about the energy code. We are connected with everyone involved with building, operating, designing buildings in New York City. These are some of the courses that we have. The folks that we are training in 32BJ and Local 94, Local 1 plumbers, Local 3 electricians, and we work with the AIA and ASHRAE to train architects and engineers in the energy code, which is a whole other thing. I'll be happy to tell you as much as you want to know about the energy code. And we advocate. So, have any of you heard of the blueprint?
Very important.
What's that?
It's very important.
Yeah.
I mean, it's where the legislation for building codes in New York City are going to evolve from.
We agree. So we've convened 80-ish organizations, you know, many experts over.
And the real estate board even approves of it.
Well,
impossibly.
No, but that's how you get things done. Because
Right.
if the real estate board, if REBNY is against it, then you have no chance of anything getting approved. So so we understand what REBNY needs, and we can talk about it ahead of time. So ideally, when the laws go to pass, they'll get passed much more quickly. And we have, you know, all the experts needed on the committee. And so the blueprint is for a series of initiatives and laws that would reduce building energy by 20% by 2030, which is a big chunk. That's only a third of the way to 80 by 50, but it would be the first biggest mandate of energy reduction that would involve 50,000 buildings in New York City.
What would they do to get the 20%?
So these are some of the things. Well, it would be a 20% mandate.
Well, these are all the blueprint ideas.
Yes, a snapshot of them. But basically, it's a mandate for the big buildings, 25,000 square feet and up, to reduce their building energy use by 20%, which is a lot. But so understanding that that's so difficult, some of the initiatives would figure out ways to make it easier for a lot of the different sectors. You know, not try to not hit affordable housing so hard. You know, extend actually reduce the heating season, because we don't actually need so much heat now all the way through the middle of May, right? We can reduce that to save a little bit of energy. So there's tinkering on all the ends to make it, to try to make it as palatable as possible. And so this is, you know, in the city council now, this is not my area of expertise. I am the director of education. I can't answer that much about this stuff, but the blueprint is on our website. You can see all the proposals and the short form descriptions as well. That was literally as fast as I could do that.
Oh, goodness.
So any questions, I'm happy to
Well,
take.
can you just
that.
talk to us a little bit about how Urban Green Council interfaces at all with, you know, with the legislation currently, for example, the city council? Could you play a role of advocacy,
Yeah.
I assume?
So,
and how the community can better understand how they can work with Urban Green Council going forward on, you know, on some of your initiatives, things like that.
we work within the industry, we don't work with the public that much. The groups that we convene, are the experts in the various, everything, like after Sandy, we were tapped to run the Building Resiliency Task Force. And, we did that fast, like, we turned that around in like 45 days or something, and, there were 33 laws that got passed. Like, for example, every building over 5 stories has to have a drinking water tap below 5 stories that can get, gravity-fed water, right? Like, that's a really good idea. And that happened and was enacted as part of the task force. In terms of the public, though, it's an important role that we play is education, because this stuff, there's so much of it. Like, all these things that we were just talking about earlier. We do programs about resilience. We did our conference last year, which is actually when we tried to come here the first time, months and months ago, last October,
Right.
about how to finance resilience. Everybody wants it, but nobody wants to pay for it tomorrow, right? Where's that money coming from? You can't finance resilience like you can finance energy efficiency, because there's a payback, right? So we have 25 events a year. Our conference this year is June 18th. And the theme is how to scale retrofits, because retrofitting the 1 million buildings we already have in New York is the only way we're going to get to 80 by 50. But how are we going to retrofit? We have 1 million buildings. How on earth? It's not happening. So that our conference is going to be about methods for scale, technology, market forces, things like that. So.
How about new construction?
New construction is only, I forget, like 10 or 14% of the building permits in New York City. The vast majority of all the work being done in New York City is existing buildings.
Oh, that's absolutely true, but the thing is, when you build a new building, you've got 50 to 75 years of that building that standard in, and so
Right, well,
missing it.
Exactly, and the energy codes are much, much stricter, and but now they're so complex. It's a lot harder to even just understand how to comply with the energy code, even for architects and engineers. So we help folks get over that, that burden as well.
So you are in education, or you're educating the public in a way that you could come back to us or do something in our community or something?
Oh, absolutely. We have public programs all the time. We try to have them all over the city, wherever people are interested. We have we're doing a series of co-ops and condos, right? Like, the finding there was like, who lives in a co-op or a condo here? Anyone on the board?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So do you guys have time on the board to figure out how to do long-term energy efficiency projects? No, you don't. We know that. So the magical finding that we figured out was that there are people in these buildings who are super psyched about doing this stuff, but they may or may not be on the board. So that group, a green team, can carry through projects that need attention paid to them, and then get the board to enact them.
But how do people know about you? I mean, as a random person sitting here who...
That's why I'm here, to say hi and say we want to be a resource to you, because we know what to do, and we're not, and we say this all the time, Urban Green doesn't tell the industry how to build. We can be in the industry, figure out what are the right and best and most cost-effective things to do, and then put out good stuff for folks to learn. It is mostly industry, except for this co-op condo thing was our first foray with the public.
So,
I think that that blueprint is really a major piece of thinking and action, and nobody here really knows much about it, and it's a very complex thing. So education there is really important.
Yeah, it's written in very clear language. All of our things are written in clear language because it's complex, but we need people to buy into what the bigger things are and support the right things at the right time.
Do you have what is the relationship with REBNY?
We have a great relationship with them. They use us as a resource. I mean, a year or so ago, we worked with them to train 800 building operators and building managers and in GPRO operations and maintenance. And it was fantastic. They were psyched to bring the industry and provide a service for their members, and we were psyched to be able to get access to those companies and train the people who have their hands on the boilers, how to how to operate buildings more efficiently.
Do you feel like that the industry is really looking towards, being more environmentally conscientious, or like Mr. Hellstrom was saying, they're just trying to get in front of the 8 ball and build as much as they can before?
No, they want to. Everybody wants to. And, I mean, that's the thing about the work we do, and like helps me go to work every day, because like when you teach people how to build and operate buildings in a more sustainable way, they never go back, right? So it's like a little ratchet, but it's so slow because it's not like not a talking point, like what's the word, like the snapshot of the little thing, like it's not that. It's like you have to kind of understand a whole bunch of things, and it's, you know, the barrier to entry is fairly high, but none of it is rocket science. It's just a question of like getting involved and figuring out what are the best things to do. Yeah.
3 questions. Where do you draw your funding from, or how did you come into being?
So we're a member organization. We get some funding, small, from the U.S. Green Building Council, mostly from foundations and sponsors, and a lot of grants like NYSERDA or private foundations.
So you are not funded by REBNY or by
No.
REBNY
I don't even think they're
developers, or?
We have some developers who are sponsors, like Lendlease is a contractor, also a developer. Related is a sponsor. United Technologies is a sponsor. It's all that's on our website.
Okay. And then, you said we know what REBNY wants. What does REBNY want? I was just wondering.
We think, well, from where we sit, it's all about like buildings for us, right? They want to provide services for their members, so education that the members need. The folks, especially the people in the Class A buildings, they want their buildings to be run efficiently. They want good indoor air in their buildings. They don't want to have a lot of waste if they don't have to. They want to save a lot of money. They want their best trained staff to be running their buildings. And they want to make sure when they have to submit their their reporting at the end of the year that they are doing well on emissions and that they're not, polluting too much. And that's all fairly doable. So.
Okay. And then, what can we do to support your mission of 80 Black?
That's a really good question, and it's for the folks who are running buildings. Let's train your staff. If you're a member of the public and you're interested in this stuff, come to our events. We most of them are not that technical.
No, I mean as a community board, not me.
See, I think getting the word out about some of the resources, really, because we publish all this stuff, and like we don't know who's reading it. Do you know what I mean? We're publishing reports to move the mission forward, and we need folks who are involved in the building community to
Are
follow
you in the
advice.
schools at all? Are you in the high schools or the
No,
colleges?
we are industry focused, not K-12.
So downtown, lots of old buildings, right? Lots of co-ops and the like.
Yeah.
Would you be able to prioritize 1, 2, and 3 maybe, the things that those kinds of buildings could do that would make the most impact, that could be doable?
Yes.
Maybe those are the things we should be focused on instead of the 1,000.
Yeah, it's a little bit different for all the buildings, and it's good to have the folks in the building sort of decide, because like I can't sit here and tell you to insulate your roof, or I can tell you to check your toilets for leaks, because you all have toilets that are leaking that are costing you thousands of dollars a year per toilet. But other than that, like the buildings are different. Depending on what kind of heating system
Really
they have
hard.
around windows.
Retrofits are really hard.
Would that be
Retrofits are
a
hard.
thing that you would come back, or somebody else from the organization would come back to identify for, sort of to look at,
I mean, it's more like, we should all like eat healthy and sleep a lot. Like the basic stuff is fairly straightforward. And, insulation and air sealing, and replace your windows with better ones when they're due. And
well, I think it would be a really helpful and useful moment if we had somebody sort of go over what those main issues are,
can do
and
that.
looking at the lower Manhattan scape in terms of the building types that we have.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
And we had one member who's not here tonight, Wendy Chapman, who's the co-chair of this committee, who asked specifically, and kind of dovetails nicely with what you do, is to have some sort of report on green roofs and how those
Yeah.
could be better employed.
And you know who else, get the retrofit accelerator in here too.
We did have them. We did have them here, yeah.
Okay.
So, anyway, or if you don't think it's you, but I think that, to Richard's question, I think it would be.
We could. I mean, my fear is just that it's like it's off base for some buildings, like a building that doesn't have steam or whatever. But we could. I'm sure we could put that together.
And also the blueprint is an important thing. so people have a better awareness of all
Yeah,
the
I
stuff
mean-
that's brought together on that.
I mean, Russell could come and give you a better outlook on the blueprint if you want. That's just
I
not
think
my thing.
that would be great, so we'll follow up with that.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
I just
Do you have any-
encourage, I just wanna keep trying to focus on how we take this and use our platform here as a way to get news coverage or,
Right.
or more attention and more options and say an article written with links to their website or to whatever this next person who would come in and give us these top 3 recommendations and resources for all the different co-ops and condos we have down here with pretty motivated and resourced homeowners.
I mean, if you wanted to do that, the program is interesting and fun and it's like an hour and 15 minutes. Like we can do that and have the folks come from co-ops and condos and do one down here. Like we have one scheduled in Queens in March.
I think
Do
that
it
would be
much-
terrific.
What are those called, those sessions?
We're calling it Co-op and Condo Energy Retrofit 101. It's a
Love it.
fantastic name. We need a better one.
I think that's a great idea.
Very catchy.
Maybe
And I think we could-
maybe we can get Southbridge to host it.
I love that.
Great, and just to answer your question, I think it's a great idea. Maybe it could actually, should try to get the information out there a little bit more successfully, whether we use our own the CB1 website and actually have some of these reports available on the website under the committee's work or something. To answer your question, Tom, as to how to get sort of out there, maybe that's one way to, we could have a link to environmental and then different organizations and the link to them and then right,
The
something like that.
resource room.
That might be a good idea.
That's, yeah, we can do that. I'll take a look at the topics of your older minutes or whatever, figure out what's probably everything, honestly. We don't have, it's very targeted, our work.
So we would contact you for the condo co-op presentation again?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
so,
we'll
so
figure it
great.
out.
All right, well, Ellen, thank you so much for
Oh,
coming.
it
It
was
was really
fun.
nice
Thank
to
you.
meet
Thanks
you.
for having
Thank you
me.
very much.
Everybody,
Thank you.
great,
Thank you
thank
very
you very much, terrific. Okay.
Now, Jason,
No, I'm out.
You're
I've
on.
said I'm not.
you're on.
I'm not trying to be difficult, by the way, Alice. I'm sorry about, I'm not trying to steal your thunder, although I do deserve a chair position on this community board at some point, somewhere.
I think that's not
I'm just
Last
joking.
I checked.
No, well, that's the type of guy.
Big advocate.
I like to be a little bit irrelevant.
Good idea.
It's a shame we lost some people, but
Well, yeah,
let's do it.
okay, so, well, thanks for, underlining and highlighting the urgency there, Jason.
my specialty.
So, I appreciate the patience of people, just generally the community probably knows that when agendas are published, they're published in the order that they will come up, so if you want to come later, you can come later, you don't have to sit through the whole meeting if it doesn't interest you. Thank you very much, Nick, for joining us. So, anyway, so Diana is going to describe, report on where we're at with 250 Water Street in terms of the environmental concerns that have now been
Does
revealed.
somebody have the application booklet? Oh,
Ah.
can I see that for a second? Thank you. So, Community Board 1, as part of this program, is what's called an official repository of any information related to it. So we have.
Can we close the door? Cora, would you mind? Because it's noisy and it's hard to hear.
Maybe the children should come in.
Happily, let them come in.
They're the one who are concerned, right?
Okay.
So this is the first of lots of materials we will be receiving regarding this. I've been at the board for 8 years. I'm Diana, Director of Planning and Land Use. I'm not a board member, I'm staff for the board. I'm not an environmental remediation expert. I've been at the board for 8 years. This is the first application that I've worked on, so we're kind of learning along with all of you, but I think we parallel a lot of your concerns, and I'll let you know what I know so far. I'll answer any questions that I can, and if you have any questions that I can't answer, I'll do my best to get them answered for you. I found a flow chart. I think what will be helpful is to kind of try to unpack the bureaucracy of a lot of this, because it is a very, in the same way that bureaucracy is really frustrating in cases like Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency, I think it can help us in situations like this where there are so many stopping points and requirements for things like public comment. So,
Could you just tell us what the overall
Yes.
problem is?
So 250 Water Street, the site at the South Street Seaport, formerly known as the Millstein site, right across from Peck Slip School, close to the Blue School near Southbridge, was recently purchased by the Howard Hughes Corporation. They haven't yet said what they're getting ready to develop on it. There's lots of speculation. We know that it's coming soon. As kind of a preliminary step to that, they're participating in a voluntary program through the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation called the Brownfield Cleanup Program. So that's what this application is. It's their application to New York State DEC for the Brownfield Cleanup Program. What that program is basically is for sites that were previously developed on where there are varying levels of contaminants or contamination. A developer can volunteer to go into this program. They do advanced remediation under supervision of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the New York State Department of Health to basically get a certificate that everything has been remediated, and there are benefits for the developer. I know there's some tax benefits to them, and they're basically no longer liable for anything that could happen as a result of any contaminants that were on the site. So Howard Hughes Corporation is doing this in conjunction with Langen. They're an engineering firm, and Langen actually was working with the previous owner, Millstein, and they had done what's called a phase 1 investigation of this site in 2014. So Howard Hughes and Langen attended our land use committee meeting last month to talk about this and give kind of a summary of things that they found during the 2014 investigation. Some of the things I know, there are some levels of mercury. They noted that there was a thermometer manufacturer on that site at some time. It's a very, very historic site. So there have been many different uses on that site. It's currently a parking lot. It's topped with asphalt. There is some kind of underground storage tank, and they did find that there was some leaked petroleum that's there. Whether it's a result of previous uses on the site or whether things have migrated to the site, that's some of the things that they found. They investigate the soil, the water, and the soil vapor, I believe. So those are some of the things that they found. Again, I'm not an environmental expert, so I can't tell you how bad or not bad those things are, but it's certainly concerning for the nearby residents and for the students and the parents of the students in the nearby schools. So that's what they told us at the previous meeting. To tell you kind of where they are in this process, my understanding is that their application is pending approval by DEC, and before that can happen, there's this 30-day comment period. That's where we are now. It's actually turned into a 60-day comment period in response to the concerns that were being sent to DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, as part of this comment period. That comment period has been extended to, I think it's March 6th. Of course, it's highlighted. It's been extended to March 6th. The Land Use Committee, when we got this update at the last month's meeting, did not choose to do a resolution, but since we were hearing so many community concerns, Anthony did. This is when we believe the deadline was February 1st. So Anthony wanted to make sure to get something on the record to state our concern over this and kind of put them on notice for this. And this is the letter that he submitted on behalf of our board in kind of his first comment period window. So after DEC kind of accepts the application into the program, what's called a Brownfield Cleanup Agreement is signed. That kicks off the program. After the agreement is signed, the applicant begins to develop a remedial investigation plan and what's called a citizen participation plan. So the citizen participation plan basically outlines, gives a summary of all of this stuff. The applicant has already begun putting together a site contact list, so that's any major stakeholders and anybody who wants to be on the list can sign up for the list, and they get all of the information that comes out of this program. They're required to release periodic fact sheets, basically information on everything that they're doing or everything that they're going to do. has to be publicly distributed, and in all cases, in all steps, undergoes another comment period. So when they're getting ready to do the remedial investigation, so anything that they've done so far was part of that 2014 preliminary investigation that Langen had done for Milstein. When they enter this program, they have to do a remedial investigation to really get a detailed look at the conditions of the site. And, that was a few years ago. I don't know how consistent things would be. But they have to do a whole new investigation under the supervision of DEC and the New York State Department of Health. Let's see, that is attached with a 30-day comment window. So before they even do any of that investigation, they have to publish what that investigation is going to look like. Everything that they're going to do as part of that investigation that is publicly noticed, and there's a 30-day comment period for that. Once that is approved by the Department of Environmental Conservation, they start to get their remediation action plan together, and that has a 45-day comment period. So before they do any of that remedial work, they have to release the plan. It's publicly noticed. There's a comment period. There's a public meeting component, which says that it's optional. My feeling is that in this case they'll do it because there's really a lot of community concern. The remedial work plan is finalized, it's done, and kind of the program wraps up. Some other things that we were told at last month's meeting is that there's really rigorous oversight by the New York State Department of Health. So New York State Department of Environmental Conservation kind of oversees the remedial work that's done, and the New York State Department of Health oversees exposure risks. They're kind of looking out for that component of how do we protect the constituents from any potential hazards here. As part of the citizen participation plan, I'd spoken with some constituents earlier this week who asked if there was a point person, somebody that they could speak to at Howard Hughes or Langen when they have questions. I can't answer all of them. I'm not an expert, so who can they speak to that's an environmental expert that can answer detailed questions about remedial work that will happen here? They haven't identified one yet, since they technically haven't started the program yet. I'm hoping they will give us some kind of point person now anyway, but they must, as part of this program, designate a point person to respond to any and all community concerns or questions from Langen, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and the New York State Department of Health. So I think that will go a long way in answering people's questions in that realm. Let's see. That's pretty much everything that I know so far. I've reached out to the project manager, Department of Environmental Conservation, to ask him some questions. He has not gotten back to me yet. And I have some questions out to Howard Hughes as well, based on things that I need to know that I don't know yet, and questions that I've gotten from constituents.
Oh, bravo, Diana. Thank you so much for the trivia.
So I read about this a little bit, and of the projects like this that ever happened, this is really the number of people that surround this, the kind of the level of toxicity in this, the fact that when you uncap it, once you remove that asphalt, if you have such a thing as a storm or something, then the dangers of what can happen kind of like go up exponentially, and that this is such a huge advantage for Howard Hughes that they can avoid any liability in the long run, and so it's a cheap way out for them to get this kind of going and get it out of the way. So I'm very concerned about, kind of like the whole process, and I really think that as a member of the public here, how do I even talk about how dangerous this is? Because I really think that it's the equivalent of an unexploded bomb underneath that asphalt. And if it goes off, it's surrounded by all these people that are right on top of it. And I think the word hazard is what I'm concerned with, and how the public can even think about evaluating what that hazard means.
Right, and it's difficult because, I'm not an expert. I would guess that most local residents are not environmental experts. Somebody had asked me, how do we get an independent assessment done, and I'm looking into that. I don't personally know, but I'm looking into it. I think it's a great question. because it's difficult, you know, even though it's at the oversight of the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Health, I can see how that would put folks at ease to have an independent look at what's happening here.
I think there's a second layer of this, and that is that there's also a city planning kind of zoning limit on what they're allowed to put there, and I think what they want to put there isn't what they're allowed to put there. So there's a difference between that, I don't know if they're deed regulations or however it's limited, but I think they want to build one of those, and the height limitations are very extreme.
Bob, can I just ask you, what are you basing your understanding of how toxic it is? Is this something that you read in newspapers?
I read a few things about this, and each one said that
You talk about like the broadsheet article or things like that?
I've read a few things out in
I
the
just was
industry. I'm
curious
not
where that-
claiming to be. I
About
read
this
things in
particular
Crane. I read
location.
things in Cranes, and I read a couple of New York Times things, and a couple of things.
About this particular
Yeah,
site
about
being
this-
highly toxic?
Yeah, about this
Site,
being
so-
extremely dangerous. You know, the word "extremely" is kind of what
In
what
time.
managed to make an
Oh,
impression
interesting. Okay.
in my brain, and I kind of went, "Wow, that," and the extremely toxic, plus the fact that it's right on top of all these people, and so when you start to unearth this stuff, then the risks are kind of exponential from the get-go, because you have, you know, lots of people plus a highly toxic
isn't there a
environment, plus the danger of rain and storm kind of like flooding that, and then
Right,
you have
no, I
a
was just curious about
massive problem.
where that information came from, as to how, you know, how toxic it was. We're gonna just do
Isn't there part of this
traditionally
process
to
that-
hear from the committee members first, anybody on the committee? or
I was
the board?
curious, I'm sure there's a wide range here, but the time frame, is there a sense of the time frame from beginning to remediation plan to remediation work?
That's one of my questions that's out to DEC. From everything I've read, it doesn't look like there's a very rigorous schedule. I think it just depends on, it's probably very site specific. There's a whole range of different levels of contamination that could be remediated as part of this program. I'm sure it's very site specific. So I didn't see any very firm deadlines or timelines for stuff like this, other than the designated comment periods, and they've already extended one of the windows of the, you know, the first leg of this. So I think it's very dependent on the comments that they're getting from the get-go, the things they need to respond to, and what they start to find once they begin that initial investigation.
And who has overall authority on approving the plan to proceed? And then who has overall authority on overseeing that?
It's the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation.
Both of those things? The plan and the oversight
Yes, they
of the
oversee the whole thing, and they'll kind of certify it once it's completed, and that's done kind of hand in hand with the health department in New York State.
One of the things that was brought up, I know, among many of the comments that were made by the public that I received, why I brought it to the attention of this committee to bring it to this committee, was the need for a master plan. And people were asking for a master plan. In this tremendous, you know, diagram here, isn't there some sort of understanding of what would be put there as part of the deal? I mean, I'm sort of seeing.
To what level of remediation they must comply?
No. What is being built there?
Yeah,
you know,
what are they trying to do?
Identifying how things will be.
They don't have to.
And nowhere in this process, did we establish that that's accurate, that there is no need to have identified the plan of what goes there prior to doing this?
That's
work?
one of the questions that I
Because
have
you
out
have
to
to know
DEC.
how it doesn't make sense, and I've spoken to people at.
Right.
That's one of the most
yeah.
frequent comments that I've gotten, and I've reached out to DEC to find out. And I think that speaks to Bob's point in that if they are going off of what's currently allowed by the zoning, but if the developer's interested in having the zoning changed to build something larger or different, that doesn't, there's a disconnect there.
Couldn't
So
there-
Well,
that's-
with all due respect, in that very brief time that I had to read the application, they checked the box off that said that this project would be the master plan of the community. I do not see how they can do that without having submitted what they plan to build. So I think at the get-go, this is a faulty application because it does not have attached to it. Now, all I did was read the executive summary page, the questions that they filled out. my background is project financing. We would never, ever do a project without feasibility of an economic nature before we would spend the time and effort. There is a flow chart here that is totally, excuse me, the cart before the horse, because that project has to be feasible. And back to the gentleman's question, or Bob's question of height restriction, a lot of this has to do is how much profit is in this, right, relative to the cost of this project. And so we have a fiduciary, the board or whoever's doing this, of knowing that this is an economically feasible project to be even brought forward to this level. They have to prove.
I want to, hi, I'm Megan.
I'm sorry, man, just to clarify, who pays for this?
The developer, Howard Hughes, is
Okay.
paying for
But
it.
Okay.
But I want to make one.
Sorry.
No, I understand, but the tax benefits for them entering into this program
Yeah.
will.
Yeah,
so-
got it.
So, 2 points. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm co-president of the PTA. I
nice
live
to meet you.
in the neighborhood. Pleasure, and thank you, Madam Chairman, for getting this in front of the CB1. I mean, I really appreciate it. Thank you. I know that was a big push. 2 points is that in their plan, what they do say is their intentions are a multi-use building with residents and also low-income housing. So that might qualify enough.
Politically, it does.
Yes.
This is
So-
a tactical strategy, frankly.
Absolutely agree. And then the other thing is.
It doesn't mention anything about, sorry to interrupt,
Size,
scale, nothing, right,
No.
just multi,
Yulene New, actually was at the town hall meeting this
Yeah.
weekend, and she used to work for the EPA. And she said the most stunning thing at the meeting. She said, there is absolutely no safe level of mercury. None in the air. Like, you cannot, there's nothing that they can do. How can you, right now it's capped, right now it's protected, right now it's away. And I'm sure we all understand that mercury on a 5-year-old's brain isn't the same as mercury on my old feeble brain. Like, I get sick, they lose IQ points and acuity. There is a completely different level of danger
Damage.
for these children. And also the elderly families that live at SBT, they're all, not all, but there's immune compromised families and people living there. A lot of 9/11 families too. The other part is that I talked to the DEC and I asked them, who has been incredibly responsive. They're amazing. I've been
good.
really impressed.
They didn't respond to me yet,
No, they
so
don't.
I'm happy you responded to you.
I asked them, how often do you ever deny an application for this type of, and pretty much it was almost never.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me too.
Yeah, so I'm really disappointed that this is a dog and pony. Like, this is just for show, and you're keeping kids up late at night, parents who are working, getting super, upset about this. Scared. And if you're just gonna let me yell into a cavern, just don't. Give me, anyway, that's my point.
Well, I
Howard
think-
Hughes has all incentive to do this. He has only incentive to get into this program.
Yeah.
They lose all liability if they get in
Right.
there, and they get huge tax. He has no reason to not join this program. And if he always, people want it to be cleaned up, I mean, it's a win-win for them. So it's frightening.
They can lose. I just wanted to make one point about the history with the CB1 Community Board and Howard Hughes, and it started with a demand from the community board to get a master plan from them, and they never gave a master plan, and we've gotten this far, and they're putting check boxes. The whole relationship from the beginning with Howard Hughes was failed, and they never made the concession about giving us a picture of what they're trying to do with our area, period.
I'll open it up to other people, yeah, good point, yeah.
Can I just ask, what should we be doing as parents, as community members? Could you
You're
give
doing
us suggestions, because we're all new at this, and we want to know, as we come together, what should we be doing? If you
Well,
have suggestions.
you're doing the right thing, which is to get this on the map and make a lot of noise about it, and already you can see that your efforts have paid off, and that it's, at the community board level, it pushed our chair to write a letter, it may push a resolution, it'll push a lot of attention on it, there will be many meetings where you will all come back and appear and make your case and your information known. You want to write your electeds, of course, to your concerns and make it very clear to them.
And submit your comments to DEC, if you haven't already, as part of this comment period. And every comment period that comes up, that has a bigger impact than you might think, and they are obligated to be responsive to those things, so I think that's.
I think we need answers to
best
to the very good questions that are being asked and which we're attempting to get, so that we're a little bit more educated on what it is that we're against and for, what exactly is going on here.
So sorry, sorry.
So, I don't know if that answers your question, but keep doing more of the same. I'd say specifically I would write electeds to the same letter you're writing here.
Right. Well, what's the resolution? What would that be about? What could that do?
Well,
So a community board resolution is the board taking an official position on something. In this case, the chairperson has written a letter in response to the comment period. I don't think that prohibits the board from submitting additionally during this comment period if they wanted to. But this committee tonight no longer has a quorum, or maybe didn't from the beginning. But if the board members feel strongly that they want a resolution this month, I would advise that you ask Anthony that we put it on the executive agenda to do a resolution based on the feedback that we got tonight.
I mean,
We can't vote tonight
there is a
without
letter,
quorum.
I don't know if you saw it, so it's a beginning,
I would ask the
but-
question.
And I would also say come to the full board meeting if we get a resolution,
Yeah.
and come to the public speaking period in force, and come and speak as much as you can in the public session, and even if
Yep.
it's not a topic that night or whatever, but, it's
Yeah,
all
you
about
sign up, right.
talking about it. And you should contact Margaret Chin's office, and you should talk Gail Brewer's office, and if you know Gail Brewer's cousin, you should contact her. You should work the system, because frankly, that's the system that we saw on the thing, and they're gonna follow every bubble, and it's gonna take them all the way to the end, and they'll follow the rules, and there's no rule that says you have to tell us what we're doing there's no rule that says you have to say what you're doing next, so they're not gonna do it. So the only thing to do is to get your voice out and come to the meeting.
But
Yeah.
what's the
Good point.
position of the people living there and the school about
Twofold.
about all of this? What viewpoint
If
do
I'm
you
wrong,
actually
please
have?
someone correct me who's in the hood.
I think there's a lot of as a member of the community board and someone who lives right there, I think it is a very varied position on the whole subject. I think there's a lot of people who maybe even for a large building there, or
No, I'm asking specifically about this.
I think there's a lot of people, I've heard a
Well,
lot
let's
of
hear from
different
some.
opinions on it, really,
Who's here
honestly.
today? Who's
I'd
here
like to
against
hear
it?
what
Who's
those
here
opinions
today?
are. Can we hear what they are?
Just a minute, I'm just gonna call on people right now, thanks.
Let's hear them.
Let's ask the other question, who would be for it?
Just a minute, thanks.
Just two comments from the Lead in New Town Hall on Sunday, where this came up for quite a
Yeah.
while. One comment was the positive thing is that even the construction company that's doing this, it's the same one that did the same work for the Whitney site in the West Village. So you might want to talk to CB2. Evidently that worked out well. They even had Sandy. The kind of negative twist was the worst thing that can happen here is they don't finish the cleanup. Right, and they can sort of blackmail you to get what they want if they
Is
don't
that an
finish the
option?
cleanup. So that proves the point.
Once you enter the program, you're committing to cleaning up, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, kind of.
If they'll,
I mean, you're committing to a process that leaves you with no liabilities regardless of what you do at the end.
Right.
So all you need to do is get a rubber stamp on it, and it's over.
Well, the elephant in the room are the air rights. Quite honestly, one of the strategic differences of this project, and I'm not familiar with the Whitney, but you've got a significant economic difference from what Wilstein had in the way of this project
10 stories.
and money committed to it than what has been happening here with Hughes. So he has got to monetize this very differently than what has been done heretofore in the program and plan that was put together in 2010 for phase one.
Because of what he spent on it.
Because there are worlds of difference. So the feasibility of this becomes very key as to whether the city's gonna blink as it relates to who owns the air rights. Right now, there is a very strong point of view that the city has those. I will tell you, Howard Hughes will take the position they don't. And so you can drive a Mack truck through that at this point, but put a hole in the ground and your leverage from my standpoint as a property owner, in what I felt was a historic district commitment by this town and city and particular zone and all the other things that go with that, goes down the toilet. So from my point of view, this whole thing is key on the public saying, stop and tell us what you really want to do.
To that point, can I say one thing? I was doing some research into this, and I got like a little deep into it, and I
Tell
found-
us who you are and where.
I'm Matt, I have two kids at Peck School in the neighborhood, and I found a transcript of some phone calls that stockholders had made to the Howard Hughes Corporation about a number of questions about developments they were having, and there were some questions about about what you were bringing up, how high is this development process going to be allowed to go, and they've essentially assured everyone on the phone, we're going to get around this, we have the air rights, we're going to make sure that we can build this as high as we want. So they're being, from my perspective, they're being disingenuous from the very
And
beginning.
they're a very highly leveraged company, let me tell you.
And I think if people are disingenuous in one aspect of this project, we can anticipate that they'll be disingenuous in others as well. So I think that my trust level for the way they're gonna go about this is very low.
Which means that they dig deeper, I would
Right.
think,
Yes.
for a building that's taller. So what they dig depends on what they're gonna build.
And they're anticipating and they're assuring their stockholders that they're gonna build high.
Yeah, I have a question based on what you said something earlier about the application potentially being flawed because they have not.
All I can do is read what.
There's actually another group that saw and found a bunch of other mistakes. Like, for instance, it's supposed to be in an economically plighted community. Not so much.
That's what those
It
funds
also-
were
a reputable
originally
company
for.
that's
It's
in
also
this
supposed- it's
process.
also supposed to be
They're gonna
someplace
put it on the
that's-
line,
it's
this
also supposed to
project, they
be-
wanna lose their license. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's also supposed to be someplace that's derelict. It's not derelict. They've been trying to build for years, but they
Right.
choose not to, and there's a parking lot on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if,
There's a couple
the application
flaws.
is
Yeah, you should
flawed.
throw it out.
There
Is that a route that you can
Let me ask
take?
a
I mean,
little bit
obviously,
differently.
if I fill out an application that's flawed, I'm gonna get denied, but I'm not that.
Well, we met the engineer that filled it out, right? That was the person, a
Langen,
very, that representative was from Langen?
Mimi from Langen,
Okay,
yeah.
and is Langen known to be a reputable
Yes,
engineering
yes,
firm? That has a
yes.
licensed person, that's not gonna do sketchy
40
things on
years.
applications?
40 years in the
Okay,
business.
so there's a small chance that maybe they're not putting their license on the line to do the right thing, even though it might not be exactly what we want,
Right.
and clean up the site the way it should be done as the program directs you, and I agree, I've been to so many meetings, Howard Hughes, they do things in a weird way when it has to do with the community, in terms of reaching out to them, they're very poor at that, but maybe there's a small chance that they'll follow the program and clean this site up. And that doesn't solve the power problem, it doesn't solve the foundation problem.
That's not a bad way to think about it, I
Well,
appreciate it. Forward looking.
Here it is from.
Can I get some, can I ask your community, and I really appreciate you all coming out, I think it's fantastic, and yes, as Jason's saying, you know, get out into the community boards and go, and every time you have a public arena, make your case known. I'd like to hear what you'd like to see happen, you know, could we talk a little bit about what ideally should be at that site from your perspective, and how would you remediate it, or not remediate it at all?
So, dream?
Yes, let's go for a couple of dreams.
It's capped, it's safe. It's, so in 2014, they knew that these toxins were there. It wasn't so important to clean up then. I mean, in 2014, we were still in the process of building our school. No one needed to tell the DOE that then. So leave it the way it is. It's safe, from what we understand. I'd like to make sure about that, but from what I understand.
for being, to be made as a park before.
Yeah, that would be a park.
Well, I think that we have to, I think,
Parent of another student at 343.
See,
I think we'd all be in agreement that what we want there, first and foremost, whatever it is however they get it, maintains safety. So I don't know enough to know if a park, if you have to dig up far enough to get a park in there with the dirt and stuff, in order to keep that stuff capped. But I think really we are first and foremost here to say we don't feel this is safe, and even if they follow every single bubble on that screen, forgive me, in my humble opinion, I still will have a lot of fear that it's not safe. I would like to read an article from, I will find out what it is from afterwards, it's at the top, this is an article, a news article, so speaking to you, we say, where did you hear that? I've had a lot of questions like that too, so this is what it says. According to the documents on file with the DEC, multiple contaminants have been identified in soil. This is speaking of
Yes,
the
this,
site.
this site.
Groundwater and soil gas, the air that is trapped between loosely packed particles of earth. These toxins include mercury, lead, petroleum, a word that I literally can't
Yeah.
pronounce, and chlorinated solvents, as well as various volatile and semi-volatile organic compounds. Mercury was found to be concentrated in the soil at levels of up to 120 milligrams per kilogram, which is more than 600 times higher than the DEC's soil cleanup objective for unrestricted use of land. Lead was detected in the groundwater on the site at levels of up to 725.5 micrograms per liter, which is more than 700 times the DEC's guidance level of 1 microgram per liter. The volatile organic...
Yeah, I think we've actually all read that article. That's the Matthew Fenton article.
That's
for those who
frightening
know. It's from
to
the
me.
broadsheet, and it was really what alarmed us all. I think it's the only article I know that I've seen. I didn't know the New York Times covered the story. I will definitely look for it. But yeah, I think that it was a very startling thing, and I think a lot of people were saying, how many other sites are similar, where people have built as of right, where these conditions existed, how dramatic is all this? So that one article has definitely, thankfully, lit us all, but I think we need to get some clarity as to exactly what that all really means.
Absolutely.
Just to know, but absolutely very
I was at the
sobering and shocking.
I was at the meeting when Mimi presented, and honestly, I walked out feeling, oh, she was like, this is not anywhere near as dirty as we thought it was going to be. These are we're really pleasantly surprised, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, all right. And then I come to find out about the mercury situation, that it can go airborne, and that it is absolutely... So my point is, she's a mom, also at 150, public school, and I'm just shocked that she sort of let it fly, that it really wasn't that big of a deal. I mean,
She did seem very confident about how it was not a big deal at that meeting.
Yeah.
The spokesperson for the person that will go through this process spoke
engineer
very,
for
very
Land.
strongly about it being
Fine.
not, fine is a good word.
That's why they got
Right.
hired.
That's why they got
Right, so I think,
Yeah,
yeah, we need a little
Okay.
more information, clarity there, that's for sure.
But-
Yeah. So anyway, more about what you'd like, so basically capping it, make it safe, the bark idea, wouldn't that be
That is
fabulous?
a dream.
Uh,
The other thing is
yeah.
build to height.
Build to height.
Build to what is allowed to be there. That's the social contract
Yeah,
that
well,
we
that,
entered
you can be
into.
assured you're
But
not alone on that
This
one.
is the key to this, because what he said in your question, and we found it, it says, is the proposed use consistent with applicable comprehensive community master plans, local waterfront revitalization plans, or other adopted land use plans? Briefly explain. Yes, they say it is, okay? And then it says included in attachment H. You look at attachment H, and in attachment H, they say what the current zoning is, and they don't mention, and they're not talking air rights, they just completely don't say anything about it. Current use, and it says intended use post remediation. And what they say with the current zoning, they said C6 district allows for a wide range of high bulk commercial use, corporate headquarters, large hotels, they mention all the large things. Then intended use post remediation, proposed redevelopment is still in the early stages of planning, but will likely be a mixed use residential and commercial development and may include affordable housing. And there goes Margaret Chin right there for the project. So, and Mayor de Blasio. So they're skirting over the whole thing, facilitating a maximal design flexibility. They are planning a big building here,
I have a
much to
question
what
from
you said.
Margaret Chin. Is Margaret Chin in favor of this brownfield cleanup?
We need clarity, we don't know what's going on, that's why I'm here to listen to all the concerns.
Are you from Margaret Chin?
I am from the Councilmember Chin's office.
And
I'm
she
Cora.
hasn't come up with an opinion yet? She hasn't?
This just came up, and it's also the community board, it's always starts with the community board, that's why it's so important. And someone go to our office, we also encourage them to show up, and we want to make sure you actually submit your individual opinion. Don't count on someone else talking to you.
Right.
It's very
Right.
important. Thank
So-
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to so bad.
there's obviously a very big issue about what they're gonna build there. But I'd kind of like to separate that out from the environmental question.
Right.
Because it seems to me, one, we don't know at this moment whether there's any release into the air at all. I mean, I haven't heard anything that says we know that. And number two, if we build anything, even a park, it requires digging.
Right.
And so it seems to me that no matter what we think about the Howard Hughes plan, something needs to be done to clean this site safely. Obviously, that's another big fear. It has to be done safely, and I don't even know how that's done, but it has to be done safely. But something needs to be done to clean the site, and not just leave it the way it is.
Well, I think what
Because
we
it
don't
could
know.
be really dangerous just the way it is.
I think what we don't know is whether anything's being released right now, if there's some.
We don't know that, and building as of right, even the 12 stories that is there, that will generate the toxic
Wouldn't that be
waste.
something that Margaret Cho would be interested in exploring, like, immediately, right? Like, there's-
Getting a
there are-
baseline.
There are health hazards currently happening right now.
Also, this is a program under the New York State, so we need to get the state level, the officials together as well, so I'm sure,
But the
Marianne was
property is New
here.
York City property.
Yes,
So if
yes.
the property is New York City property, isn't it possible for our council member to actively see if she needs to protect her
This is-
constituents from a present danger that
This is something-
may be a hazard?
This is something very, very important for the whole community. It's not just one office. Like Assembly Member Glick's office, she was here earlier, Mary. So we have to get all together. The community, your own voice, and then community board, governor, we're all working together.
Would you
Okay, so-
consider sponsoring a joint letter saying that we need to have answers right now for what is the situation right now? If it's been identified as a brownfield project that we didn't know about,
So-
as a community, we didn't know it, shouldn't we right now have answers, and shouldn't an alarm bell be rung, saying, well,
So-
let's find out what the status is, and then we can decide whether, oh yeah, a brownfield
Is the
remediation
best way to
makes sense,
proceed.
or maybe it isn't, or whatever, but shouldn't there be a momentary stop the clock, let's look at this for our community?
I am here, that's why
Yes.
I am here today.
So is that a
I'm gonna-
possibility,
I will bring your request back to council member, and also like now, it's my first time reading this letter as well. So we have a lot of work to do together.
Maybe that's part of
So-
the basis of the resolution, that we should be quickly
I think
announcing
So-
to these people that are supposed to know already, that didn't know.
So I would like to offer a couple of things. I think that what you had to say is like the basis of what we want to say here. Your idea that we really are concerned, that we really want to stop the clock, that we really want to make a difference, and that we often pass resolutions and they get as far as a resolution goes. But I have an idea, maybe, that it's possible to use a resolution as a petition also, so that we could pass a resolution and then have that go as a petition for signatures of parents at this Blue School or at the Peck School, or send the petition over to Southbridge Towers and St. Margaret's House and those places that are right around there. Because once people start putting their names on it, it gives us a crescendo of interest.
Yeah, I think Anthony's running the letter, and Anthony Notaro, our board chair, was a step where he wants very much on behalf of the community to engage more fully on this and have a better understanding of the toxins and all the different variables we've talked about. Seems like a good first step. As far as a specific resolution, Diana has made the suggestion, or actually it's the process, that you would go to the executive committee. I guess that's on Wednesday? Well, anyway, we'll get the day to give, this idea forward to.
I think that what I'm trying to express here is a sense of alarm, that it's not like normal business. It's kind of like people are really concerned about this. They're really worried about their kids, and they just say, wait a second. I mean, it isn't like, oh, well, it's wait a second.
Right. Well, they should have people that are looking at.
We got a few more people that we're gonna hear from before we wrap up.
Right.
Richard, just a minute.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
So,
Go ahead.
my name is Yvette, I live in the neighborhood, I have a 4-year-old who is potentially going to Peck Slip next year. I work with a child at Blue School, whose mother I was speaking to this afternoon, and she just happened to mention all of this to me in passing. And I nearly had a full connection. I did not know, I was like, what are you talking about? So she forwards me all these articles, and she tells me about tonight's meeting, and I was like, I am all over this. And I'm like, this is insane to me. I don't think, to Mr. Bob's point, that there has been enough noise made about this. We live in City Hall District. My child goes to school in the Chancellor's Building. I'm not understanding why I just heard about this today. Like, this needs to be, like, we need to be shouting this from the rooftops. This needs to be all over New York One. This needs to be everywhere. Like, I mean, I spoke to Regison's office about picking up, like, broken tree branches in the courtyard at my child, and the next morning was on it, you know? So I'm like, that was a big deal to us. So I don't understand, like, there are many families in this neighborhood. This needs to be loud. Like, we need to be all over this, not just, I mean, I appreciate people speaking on our behalf and trying to defend us. I completely appreciate that, but I just feel like we need to make more noise about this. I don't know. I mean.
So you gotta come to the last chance is the
No,
monthly
but-
meeting, I'm just saying, that
But
you
we
have to
can-
set up to
Now I'm
that.
like, yes, I am.
So what's the date of the monthly meeting?
But we can push your resolution now, though. That was your idea.
We can't do a resolution tonight.
I mean, but we can push the idea of one.
What's the
Yeah,
night of
we
the
can push
meeting?
the idea of one.
Exact is the 20th.
So you have to the 20th, that is the deadline. You gotta
If
show up on the
Anthony
20th, we have
agrees
to
to
give
put
you a
it on
nice
the agenda.
resolution.
Okay.
If
Maybe show up on the
Anthony
20th.
agrees.
The 20th here.
No,
is here.
it is here, on
And
what
the-
floor?
Well, our
We don't-
executive meeting is the 20th in this room, our full board
Oh, I
meeting
know.
is the 26th
Okay, good.
in this building.
The
in
26th
Nestle.
That's better,
is
because
the
it's spring
best
break the
one.
20th, so many of us are like, wait, hold on,
Right.
we're not, don't do the 20th.
That's the due date.
Yeah.
To scream that day and give all the facts you want and all the pictures you want and all the petitions, and we'll help you, it sounds like we're gonna help, we can with the
Okay, can
resolution.
you help us make what a petition will look like, so we can.
I'm sure I can help you with that.
Southbridge and.
I'm sure we can
She's
work
telling
on
us that
that.
we need to get, like, she's just like, there's 1,800 people that should be.
I'll help them with the petition layout, okay?
Right.
That could be my
It's really
contribution.
important.
Yeah, okay.
You know.
Okay,
If
so-
people want the information on how to submit to the Department of Environmental Conservation, I made printouts of that contact information, and I will give my card to whoever wants to keep in contact with me about this.
Great, yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a question of our resident expert? Do you know if this is a application to clear this site from the goodness of their heart?
Yes.
Or is this an application to clear this site to build a building?
Yeah.
I would have to imagine that a developer never does anything from the goodness, I mean, they have a bottom line, so I have to imagine they're motivated by,
So I go to Richard's point of, let's clear this and say, at our risk, our personal risk, as opposed to corporations. Because once they start that, then they are on a road to completion. And we don't have any idea what completion is. So our best chance here is to stop it now so that this can be done, as opposed to going for a clearance of a site. I don't disagree with you as to what should be done, but I'd say tactically, you know, this is hardball.
Take your point.
The thing is,
I honestly think,
Take your
Jim,
point.
when you asked what we would like done, my answer is shut it down. That's it, that's all I want.
I would just, I think it's important, I'm just gonna end with this, or at least in my own thinking, is when you go to speak out and when you go to advocate for something, try to advocate for something, not entirely against it, because we all are upset that we breathe in mercury. This is a no-brainer. But what we don't know is, one, what are the facts really here? Outside of one article, we really need to know how many sites in Lower Manhattan, in fact, were environmentally challenged and that we're living around. What exactly is this site about? Is this really a key terrible thing, or is this not so terrible? We don't really know. I think we need to really establish fact here, establish motive, establish plan, But from your end, you're not gonna get all that probably in the next week or two. We're all busy looking for that, and all of us together are trying to get the information we're needing. But what you can do is spend some time thinking, what do you want? What do you think could happen? And be realistic. As you're all pointing out, this is a developer who's planning on developing something there. So, with that in mind, go ahead and, speak up and do what you need to do, but advocate for something. when you-
But-
$180 million.
I agree with that.
Park isn't gonna give us money back.
Prison there,
So-
that would be enough to say, don't build a prison.
Absolutely.
No,
I think-
no, just stop.
Yeah, advocate for nothing then.
An
But
underground
don't
prison,
just say,
can't-
say what the plan is that
Underwater
you'd like to
prison.
see. That would be helpful.
But-
I think.
Alice, she's.
I think,
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just have one thing to say. I'm a student at PACE. I'm an environmental studies student. And I'd like to speak to the importance of making a public comment. I am a member of the environmental clinic at PACE. And a lot comes from working hard in your community and coming to these meetings. And these public comments are really important. Big things that we've done, just to put in perspective how important these are, is we banned elephants in entertainment in the state of New York. We got the Army Corps of Engineering to completely halt a project that wanted to put oil barges on the Hudson. So I think that could be another thing like this. Your public comments are really important.
Can you, will
Are you
Pace
taking
be
a position?
participating
Yeah.
in this
I'll
subject?
definitely bring this issue to my clinic. I didn't know that it was happening.
Oh, yeah, my goodness.
so I think,
That was a
Yeah.
good one for you to bring to the clinic, for sure.
And then just, so actually, it's not on the same topic, but when she was talking earlier about the storm surge barrier, I just want to know how many people know about the Army Corps of Engineering's project for the storm surge barrier.
Well, we've had a presentation
We
here
already
for the
did.
community board,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
We know it pretty.
No, not the big U, something.
Is that something that you?
PACE Clinic did submit a public comment, so I'm
Oh,
not
good.
saying that I'm an expert, but kind of.
Pace is taking a position?
That'll be coming back,
Yeah,
you can
the
be
position
sure.
is the-
Anyway, I can't, I'm really, thank you. I didn't know that PACE had this, that's fantastic, so it's
What's the
gonna-
name of the organization? What is it again?
It's like a class that you can take. It's
Oh, a
called
class.
the Environmental Policy Clinic. John Cronin.
Like you don't have enough to do, you come out for a community
you
board
come
meeting.
to all our
God bless them. Look at that. Well, I would definitely get that PACE clinics, with the,
Yeah,
get
no,
the,
we definitely would love to be a part of this, and I'll definitely talk to my professor.
yeah, and Diana can give you whatever
Did you get my
information we
card?
have. Do you
I
have her card? Yeah, okay.
We need to make one last announcement. Howard Hughes and Langan are presenting at our PTA meeting on Wednesday.
Oh,
That's an
oh, that's
important
right,
thing.
that's great, that's
Because-
great.
That's very nice.
I
of
asked
Next
you.
Wednesday,
Yeah,
but I think,
the 13th.
Yes.
February 13th, okay.
just as a final
Wrap it
comment,
up, yes.
I would like to say that the one thing that we could do is actually make a call for a full stop on the whole process while we learn all these answers.
Well, I think that.
Because what happens is to allow this thing to go, kind of allow the blimp to kind of cross the city and keep going, it keeps going. But if we do something that says we demand right now a full stop so we can get all this information that we need even before we can learn about it and comment. Because we don't know all the things that you want to ask.
We're all asking, right.
But we shouldn't allow the process to go forward when we don't know that stuff, because it gets to step 7 and we're at step 1 and it's over.
Often there, yeah.
QED. I've done this a lot now, and I just I don't want to get beat by Howard Hughes again.
Howard Hughes. Boy, all right, so, well, I hope this was helpful. It's another arena from which to launch this initiative, whatever it may be, and, we're on it. Do show up to the community board meeting.
Richard, how have you been?
All right, Jay, I thought that was you, I wasn't quite sure.
Every day, I think at least I can
Thank you.
I think fired up.
Following my lead here. Anyway, yours. Great, all right, great to see you here, Jay. Now I know where Emily has gotten her good looks.
How about her volubility? I mean,
That too. She's amazing. I love your ability.
you're so we just got back from Australia from seeing our other daughter. And 25 hours on But we wish that daughter were closer, and the two of them you have to wrestle with.
I don't know, one is tough enough. But she's great. The only problem I have with her is she's doing too many things, and I can't get her to do stuff with us.
She is. It's hard. She just doesn't have that. And well, and to have twin boys who are 11, that's like, trying to push spaghetti up a wall. I mean, it's, or herd cats, and then with Harry.